Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're talking about something that quietly determines success in investing, business, and life, the problems you choose to solve. Now, most people spend their time avoiding problems. Successful investors do the opposite. They learn how to identify the right problems and solve them systematically. Now, because the truth is, wealth often flows to the people who solve problems the fastest and the smartest. And today, Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner is joining me to talk about how investors approach problems differently and why learning this skill can dramatically change your financial life. And before we get into it, make sure you go to stockcastbonus.com, grab your free investing tools and resources. If you want to develop the mindset and the structure that great investors use, that's where you start. Andy, welcome back.
Boy, this topic, you've got my mind racing already. There's so much here, so much to share here about problem solving. This is so good. This is such a good topic. I hope people appreciate the benefit of what I mean. If your person knows how to solve problems, oh man, you're a valuable human being. Valuable.
It's a phenomenal skill set to have. Now, before we get into that, there's other skills to develop. Stockcastbonus.com, amazing resources in there to develop skills. What do our listeners receive when they go there?
Well, right now we have a free ebook. It's free. You can download that for free. It's going to talk about the most important numbers on your financial statement, most importantly, how to move the needle. You know, if I were to look at a financial statement, income, expenses, net income or cash flow, assets, liabilities, net worth or equity, how do you move the needle on those numbers? Wouldn't it be cool to go through your own financial life and get those 6 numbers where they are right now and say, I want to move this one. How do I do it? Or I want to move this one. Or how do I do it? You can literally, not figuratively, you can literally put your current financial statement down on one half of the paper, those 6 numbers, and then you could create a dream one. What would be the ideal one on the other part of the paper and say, all right, how do I bridge that? How do I change those numbers and move that needle? So it's free. You can check it out and download it, no charge. What a great exercise every week is to have your current financial statement, your future financial statement, and know how to move those 6 numbers to make them look like you want them to look like. So very valuable and yet free. So go there and get yours. It's there waiting for you, sitting on a silver platter. Go snatch it.
There you go. There we go. All right. So let's start here. Why do so many people struggle financially or professionally? Not because they lack intelligence, not because let's just say because they approach problems the wrong way. Like, why do people struggle because of their relationships with problems?
So there's so many different ways we could go here, and I'm trying to, in real time, think on my feet well enough to create a great order to this. So maybe if I can, this might not be a direct answer to your question, but it's something I feel I'd like to share about the topic. Robert had us do a book study. And when Robert studies, it's not like we're just going to read a book. You're going to study it. And there were rules to it. One of the rules when we would gather after, we'd spend a lot of weeks. And you should see Robert. Robert will destroy those books, man. There's Post-it notes and underlines and flags and tabs. And he devours that stuff and he fine-tooth combs it. And the rule is when you glean something from the book that struck you, you had to say these words exactly. What the author said was. And what that did is it stripped away your own opinions, and it really took the essence of what the author said so we could really hear this, he or she, whoever wrote it. So one of the books we studied was Turning Pro. Great book. And then after you read it, then you can, see if you have any old opinions that were changed or, opinions were confirmed or new opinions, after you read it. And one of the things that Robert said that is just seared into my brain, branded like you'd brand your cattle in my brain. And it really created a divide in how I look at people. Is he made a definition of a pro and an amateur that I thought was fantastic. And I've kept it with me ever since. Amateurs cause problems and professionals solve problems. And if you want to be a professional, that's a big deal, because I went back to my own company, and the poor people that work for us, all of a sudden I saw everything through that lens. Who are the people in the organization that cause problems, and who are the people in the organization that are solving them? And there's your amateurs and your pro. So that's a great context, I think, to begin with, is something right from Robert that he gave me, a wonderful gift. Amateurs are problem causers. They're causing problems. They're amateurs. Professionals, they come with solutions. So that's the first thing that I would say.
Now, what about going with professionals? Which I love that book. It's such a great book. I think
It's a good one.
Stephen Pressfield, if I remember right, is the author to that.
Turning Pro is awesome, and it talks about, well, we don't need to do a book summary on it, but it was a great one. But that's really one of the things that came out of that book study, is we looked at amateurs and pros through that lens. Now, I'll give you another thing that I think is really important. And I'm going to we need to Google this, because my mind, the person who made this quote, their name escapes me, and I should have it, but I don't. But I can give the quote and apologize to the person who said it. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. So if you want to talk about being a pro now, and we say, I want to go from someone who causes problems to solving them, the first step in solving a problem is being able to understand what the real problem is, and to state that problem perfectly. A problem that is perfectly identified and well stated and accurate is a problem half solved, because that's half the issue. What I mean by that is, and this has a lot to do with locus control, if I don't know what my problem is, I can't solve it. If I'm misreading the problem, I can't solve it. This is why KPIs are so important. Is KPIs, key performance indicators, help me, the metrics and the measurement help me identify where a problem is, not what it is, but where it is, right? Where is this problem in my business or in my investing or in my life, right? Why is this metric not where it needs to be? That gets my attention on. Now we got to discover, now we know where the problem is, but we got to know what it is. What is causing this? And we got to do some reconnaissance. We got to do some research. We got to find out what that problem really is. Because if you try to solve the wrong problem, you're not solving the problem. So that ability to say, what is the problem? And here's where this catches people, I think. At least it's caught me many times. Often, the nature is to have an external locus of control. I will tell you right now, entrepreneurs, investors have an internal locus of control. Both exist in reality. There's external things and internal things, but the difference is people tend to say can I just give some examples? Problem. We got the wrong guy in the White House. Half the country is going to say that, no matter who's in there. So when Biden was in there, people said, well, the problem is Biden. And then Trump gets in there and say, now the other half are saying, well, the problem is Trump. And the reality is their own personal financial statement hasn't changed very much as far as assets go. If you look at the amount of assets they had in either presidency, it's probably the same, none or a lot. And so people that build assets, so the problem is Congress. Okay, here's another one. Well, the problem is the Fed. They're printing too much money. The problem is inflation. The problem is the pandemic. The problem is legislation. The problem is our culture. The problem is my wife. My problem is my boss. These are all external fake problems. They're not the real issue. Another important thing that is really important on why identifying a problem is so important is the problem implies the solution. I had a really good friend of mine, and I remember he's doing some teaching, and he asked the people, what do you think the problems are? Why do you people think people are struggling? And he had like 30 different things thrown out there. And I was just sitting in the back of the room watching these people. None of them were the real problem. None of them were. Not one person in that room knew what the real problem was. And to a person, they were all external. It was the government, it was the school system, it was this, that, and the other. And the problem with that is, like, let's say that, the problem is mass unemployment. Well, if the problem's unemployment, what's the solution? Employment. The problem is we got the wrong guy in the White House. Okay, what's the solution? We'll get the right guy in the White House. And none of these are things you can control. None of them. So once you get a real identification of the problem, you'll find that most of the time it's internal. It doesn't mean that external things don't happen. My wife gets breast cancer. That's external, right? That's a problem. But how do we solve it is going to be internal. How do we react? What control do we have over that? What are the steps we can take to address that problem, right, in the best way possible? And so that's that internal locus of control is, if you can state the problem well, that will unveil things you can do to work on it internally. And then you can become a pro and be a problem solver.
That's fantastic right there. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Listeners, if wealth is often created by solving problems, then the real question becomes, how do you get better at solving them? So when we come back, Andy's going to break down the mindset and the systems investors use to solve problems faster and make better financial decisions. And don't forget, go to stockcastbonus.com, download your free resources. These tools will help you to build clarity and structure in your financial thinking. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning, as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something. They really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. Andy, let's get practical here. If someone wants to become better at solving problems, especially financial problems, where should they start?
Well, just carrying over from the last episode, you start with identifying it and defining it well. And during the break, I looked it up. Charles Kettering is who said, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." So that is the beginning, right? Metrics, you start with KPIs or some type of metric. If it's health, you get a metric. What is my A1C? What is my blood pressure, right? What is my BMI? You start with a metric. And then once you see that metric, we say, okay, what is causing that? Diagnosis, right? What is causing that? Then once we get a proper diagnosis, a misdiagnosis is, boy, that's tragic, isn't it? If you get misdiagnosed, you're going to spend time, energy, and money climbing up the ladder in the wrong wall, right? So the identification of that is a big, big deal. And then when it comes to starting to solve it, man, I would say don't go it alone. Get a think tank, get a brain trust. And we talked about this in a previous podcast of having mentors, coaches, teachers, advisors. If it's a tax problem, I want a tax advisor like Tom Wheelwright. I'm not going to solve that by myself. So, getting a team of competent people, and that's why professionals is so important, is one of the reasons investing is a team sport is if true professionals solve problems, then you can surround yourself with those think tanks to get them solved. Problem is, if you have an amateur on that team, they're not going to solve the problem. They're going to create more, right? So when you choose your advisors and you choose your teammates, that's a very important problem to solve, because you're finding problem solvers, not problem creators. So once that thing is well defined, and this is really important, if you can become a problem solver, think about problems in terms of their mass and their volume. How dense, how heavy, and how big is it? And I often say that the depth and breadth, the depth and breadth, picture a square, right? The depth and breadth, as that thing gets deeper and wider, right? The depth and breadth, as that thing goes like this, that reveals the value of the solution. So the people who get ridiculously sick, vulgar, insane rich, just vulgar rich, they solve problems that are just unbelievably big, right? Unbelievably big problems. And when they solve them, like a polio vaccine, you take out polio, just imagine a cure for Alzheimer's right now. The value of that cure, is just insane. And so if you can identify that problem, if it's a big one, you can get a solution to it. That's why I think financial education is underrated as a solution. Let me give you an example. Well, my problem is I don't have enough money. It takes money to make money. And if I had more money, then I could invest. Well, could you? If I give you a paper trade account and I start you with $100,000, can you turn that 100,000 into 110? And how long would it take you to get that 10%? How long would it take you if money is the issue? And yet, it almost seems that if you had the knowledge to do that, the money would arrive. Example, Back to the Future 2 or 3, or whatever it was. You got Biff, the villain, Biff, the bully villain. And Biff steals the DeLorean. He gets the flux capacitor and he goes up to 88 miles an hour in the DeLorean. He goes in the future and he steals a sports almanac. So now he knows the future. He didn't steal money from a bank. He didn't have any more money than he had when he went back. But when he went back, he knew the future. And as a result, he became ridiculously sick, vulgar rich because he knew the future, right? So it wasn't that he needed more money. He needed to know the future. Okay, well, what does education help us do, right? And so I would submit that if a person knows how to take 100,000, turn it to 110, well, then he can take 100 and turn it into 110, and the compounding begins, right? So knowledge is a wonderful solution, but very few people look at their financial situation through that lens and say, gee, maybe it's just three things. Maybe my wealth is just determined by three problems. I don't know how to invest. My temperament is not like an investor temperament, and my discipline and consistency doesn't look like an investor. Now, this is really cool. What if I could wave a magic wand over everyone listening and automatically they had the same financial education as, say, a Robert Kiyosaki, same knowledge? And then I waved a magic wand over them and I said, you now have the discipline of David Goggins, right? And I wave a magic wand over and says, you now have the temperament of Warren Buffett. Who wouldn't take that in a heartbeat and tell me that now you think money's your problem? Because if you had those three things, you'd dominate. You'd absolutely dominate, right? So that's my pursuit, is I try to get smarter. I try to improve my temperament, and I try to improve my discipline. For me, the third one's the hardest for me. I have a ADHD type of brain that just is all over the place, and I go down rabbit. If you have a tennis ball of any size and you just throw it, I just start running automatically, whether it's a good tennis ball or not. I just can't resist it. Oh, there's a tennis ball. Wow, bye. But I work on those three things, and while I'm imperfect in it, seems to be working out. So yeah, what is the real problem? Is it who's in the White House, or is it my own discipline? Is it the school system, or is it my own pursuits of education now that I'm out of school? Is it is it my spouse, or is it my temperament that needs to be improved, right? And as soon as you take that, identify the problem, and find solutions that are within your locus of control, then you got some. And if your problem is, well, I just haven't won the lottery yet, that's my problem. I haven't won the lottery yet. I gotta win that lottery. That's my problem. And that's not in the locus of control. Now, it would be a solution, maybe, right? Might, but it's not within the locus of your control.
Now, speaking of control and speaking of discipline, let's talk about systems. How do systems? I'm still trying to wrap my idea around amateurs and
Yeah.
professionals. Professionals use systems. How do systems help investors solve problems more effectively?
Yeah, I think the best example in my personal circle that I've ever seen in systems is my friend Nathaniel. I says, who names their kid Than? It's Nathaniel. So kind of a cool way to say Nathan, right? But Than Merrill, that dude knows how to McDonaldize anything. And I think what systems do is they reduce complexity down to where you automate certain things and you remove the decision making, so you can have people around you that don't cause problems, and the system becomes the solution rather than a person. In other words, McDonald's is really amazing because the average person, I mean, if you take out the manager and you look at all those people that are running those zillion restaurants, they're not the highest paid people. So why is that? Well, because they McDonaldize it, right? They have a system, and that's really what franchises are. That's why franchises, I don't know, I'm assuming that's why franchises do better than the average startup, right? You're probably going to be better buying a Wendy's than starting Joe's hamburger stand. You just are, because the systems are already built. So systems are built to solve problems, right? That's why we build them, and they make them replicatable and scalable, where you can multiply yourself through systems. So that's like, for example, when you look at my investing system has a name. It's called the 4 pillars, and there's 4 different areas of scrutiny and criteria and knowledge that we apply to every investment. And that's not just stocks. It works with any investment: business, real estate, commodities, oil, crypto, whatever you want to do. You run it through those 4 pillars, and that system solves problems. So if you have a system that can solve problems, now it's inheritable, it's teachable, it's learnable, it's transferable, it's scalable. I think that's where systems come in.
I love that. Now, if someone that's listening to this wants to start solving their own financial problems more effectively, what's one action that they could take this week to help with that?
Well, we often ask that question on episodes, so people already know the answer. And we do that to motivate people and give them a reason to go collect what's theirs for free. I mean, there's a solution at the website, right? Just go there and think about financially. I mentioned KPIs. So in my life, if I sit down with my wife, we look at those 6 numbers per se, we can identify a weakness in one or more of those numbers, right? So now we know where the problem exists, not what, but where. And we say, okay, here's where it is. Now, what is the problem? Why is that number not moving? Why is it not where we want it to be? Then I look at my other financial statement that would be ideal, what I'd like it to look like. We say, how do we solve that problem? So maybe it's this number. Maybe it's that one is the stickler. Well, that's where people can go, and you can learn how to move the needle on those numbers. Maybe my overall problem is a buying power problem, not a lack of money, but a lack of buying power. Those are 2 different things, because your buying power isn't just the money you have. It is included in that number, but it's also access to money. So you can have money or you can have access to money. So when someone says, well, I don't have enough money to buy something, okay, well, that may be true. So let's increase your buying power. How could I do that? Well, a couple different ways. You could borrow money, or you could leverage. For example, right now, and people might be too late, but right now I'm in my middle of my annual event, and we call them the Quick Start Labs. It's an annual event. We do it usually in the spring, usually in March. And so, it'll end, and we do 8 sessions live every year, 2 a week, every week for the month of March. And one of the things we're doing that's really interesting is we picked a stock that has a 1% per year dividend. So we started with a stock that'll pay you 1% on your money. 1%, doesn't even keep up with inflation. We've kept that same stock, and for 8 weeks, we're on the 5th week, 8 sessions, 2 a week. So we're about halfway through as of this recording. By the time this comes out, sorry guys, you'll be too late. But those are in the Quick Start Lab. We're taking the same stock and we're showing how to control it with less and less and less and less and less money. So for example, we started out with a stock that was about $60. We say, you want to buy 100 shares? That's $6,000. Then we took it down to $1,500. Then we took it down to $800. Then we're going to take it down to even less. And every lesson we say same stock, but we're learning to control it with less and less and less and less and less money. So our buying power increases, not because we had more borrowing power and not because we had more money, but because we had a better technique to control more stock with less money. And so it was an educational issue. And the people in this year, the comments are unbelievable. They're blown away. They're like, wait. I'm not borrowing any money. I'm not increasing the amount of money I have in my bank account. And yet I'm able to have more buying power and more control here simply because I'm learning different, what we call debt-free leverage without debt, simply by structure and by contract, as opposed to the obligation of debt. So that's a great example. So go get your free stuff and start learning different ways to move the needle on the metrics. So KPIs reveal, there could be a problem here, Houston. We have a problem. Okay, now we know where it is. Let's investigate and find out what it is and what solutions are external locus of control solutions. My problem is I haven't won the lottery yet. That's what I got to solve. I got to win the lottery. I got to figure out a way to win the lottery. It's out of your control. So your solution has to be internal locus. So you now have power. There's power that is born with internal locus control. You have a problem well stated, and that's a problem half solved. You get mentors, you get professionals, people that know how to solve problems, a team sport, and then you go attack that problem. Yeah, pretty good little podcast today. Pretty good.
Nice.
Not too shabby, as Noah Davidson would say. Not too shabby. So there you have it.
All right. That's a great place to end right there. Problems are unavoidable, but how you respond to them determines your future. The most successful investors aren't the ones who avoid challenges. They're the ones who learn how to solve them better and faster than everyone else. Big thank you to Andy Tanner for breaking this down for us. Now, if you want to develop the financial skills that help investors solve problems and build wealth, go to stockcastbonus.com right now. You'll find free tools and resources designed to help you to invest smarter. If you got value from this episode, like it, subscribe, share it with someone who thinks differently about money. You're not here by accident. You're building something most people won't. Stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.